American, Egyptian and other forces from nations allied to the United States are preparing for joint military drills. So far, US troops and military equipment have arrived in the North African nation. The Bright Star military maneuvers are set to take place until the 20th of September at the Mohammed Naguid military base. Troops from Greece, Jordan, UK, South Arabia, Italy, France, United Arab Emirates are set to take part in the exercise. Well, recently, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo authorized millions of US dollars in military aid to Egypt. Well, let's get you more on that story with CGTN's Adel Al-Mahrouhi, who is there for us. Tell us about this military exercise taking place up to the 20th of September and how participants in the exercise were selected.
This is a major military exercise that has been taking place annually since 1980. It is founded by the United States and Egypt, part of the Camp David Peace Treaty that Egypt signed in 1979, yes. And basically since then, this military drill has been getting bigger and bigger. Today, or this week, it has started on Saturday and will go on until September 20th, as you said, Karen. And the Egyptian Armed Forces says this is the biggest collaboration in terms of the number of participating countries. There are about 23 countries in the Bright Star military exercises or war games, 16 of which from Asia and Africa mainly are observers, beside the countries that you've mentioned that are the main participants in the land, air and sea or maritime drills. USA, UK, France, Italy, Saudi Arabia, UAE and Jordan are the main players, beside Egypt, of course, in that drill. It aims to enhance international cooperation in armed forces to tackle unconventional warfare, mainly terrorists and other tactics, so that there will be common terms between different armed forces of different countries, so that when there is a common interest like the global war against ISIS, for example, or the coalition against terrorism, the forces will go there. Was already a known terminology and known tactics that they can all cooperate with and have been previously identified. So it's not just about implementing or showing off military power, but it's also about studying and creating a new common base so that these countries can work together in any platform.
And Adele, this also comes after US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo authorized the release of $1.2 billion in US military assistance to Egypt. What's the significance of such military ties between Egypt and America?
The United States also, since the Camp David Peace Treaty that also saw the birth of Bright Star, has been committed to give Egypt around $1.5 billion in aid. Most of them, $1.3 billion, are in military aid. That has been more or less almost continuous, but whenever there is political differences, whenever there is a discussion in the US Congress about Egypt's human rights file, the aid more or less gets frozen. It has been more, we've seen more maneuvering or more struggle for Egypt to get this flow of aid under President Obama's administration. When President Trump came to the White House, things have been more fluent. He has resumed most of that frozen aid, even when Congress has frozen about $300 million of that aid on accusations or on concerns over the human rights file of Egypt. Most of them, about $200 million, have resumed. There has been still more talks going on about the rest of that aid, but it is expected that with the strong back of President Trump, who was a great supporter to President El-Sisi and vice versa, that the rest of the aid should flow in continuously. This part of the aid is to guarantee that Egypt keeps using US arms, something that even President El-Sisi himself have seen that Egypt must change its tactics of totally relying on US arms. And since President El-Sisi came to power, he has been very keen to diversify the infrastructure of the Egyptian arms. He went to France, to Russia and China as new suppliers to create a new infrastructure that does not heavily rely on the United States for arms, so that when the aid stops, the Egyptian army will not be affected so much.
Well, you were just touching on there the uncertain relations between the US and Egypt at the moment, especially starting from the overthrow of President Mohamed Morsi in July of 2013. Tell us a bit more about that.
It was a break point in the relations between Egypt and the United States after President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, then as defense minister, led the army to oust President Morsi based on popular protests that have taken the street more significantly and much bigger than January 25th uprising in 2011. The United States considered it as a violation to the democracy that Egypt has established and the vote process that has brought President Morsi to power, but the armed forces led by President el-Sisi believe that the defense minister, of course, back then believed that the major popular part of Egypt wanted the Muslim Brotherhood out of the leadership of Egypt. He then ran for presidency and won an outstanding about 99% of the votes and has been winning even his second term by quite close percentages, showing that he has very strong popularity in the street. With the election of President Trump to the White House, this tension have almost entirely faded, and both presidents have been quite vocal supporters of one another, showing warmer collaboration and warming relations than those President el-Sisi had with President Barack Obama. And it is expected that as long as there are mutual interests, the relation between both countries will become deeper in the coming years, at least as long as President Trump remains in the White House.
Okay, thank you for that update. That was CGTN's Adel El Mahrouhi.